Rhea Moon's boots crunched against the sharp metallic sand as she surveyed the silent wasteland around her. The planetoid broken. Didn't even deserve the exclamation mark that some ancient cartographer had stuck on its star chart label. It was just another graveyard of failed venture scrap that wasn't worth hauling away, dotted with the remains of projects abandoned decades ago. Her utility rig was parked on a jagged outcrop nearby, a flat-treaded workhorse that had been her companion for most of her solo salvaging career. She'd planned on spending a week here, picking apart the twisted hulls of obsolete freighters, hoping to scrounge something valuable enough to offset the cost of replacing her rig's burnt-out power core. A straightforward job, Rhea had told herself. No surprises. Just the kind of dull, methodical labor she needed to clear her head and keep her ship in working order. But then the signal came. It wasn't the normal kind of distress beacon she was used to ignoring. This one wasn't registered on any known frequency. No ID tag, no origin marker. Just a steady, rhythmic ping from the far edge of her scanner's range. Rhea debated whether to check it out. Her instincts told her to let it go. Unidentified signals often meant trouble. The smart move was to stay focused on salvage and leave the mystery for someone else. Except no one else was coming. Broken. Hadn't seen a ship other than her own in months. And something about the signal's persistence bothered her. It wasn't asking for help. It was just there. Like a forgotten voice, endlessly calling into silence. Against her better judgment, Rhea adjusted the rig's heading and started following the beacon. An hour later, she found the source. A cargo ship, or what was left of one. The vessel had crashed into the side of a ravine, the wreckage twisted and half-buried under layers of metallic sand. As Rhea approached, the signal grew louder until it filled the cabin of her rig, a haunting tone that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. She parked the rig and approached the ship on foot, her tool belt jangling softly against her hip. The air was thin here, barely enough for a breather mask to handle, but it was breathable. Rhea peered into the torn-open cargo bay and froze. At first, she thought it was just a pile of wreckage, a mass of shimmering black metal tangled in the remains of the ship's transport clamps. But then the pile moved. A massive, scaled tail coiled and uncoiled with slow, deliberate motions. Two immense wings, one tattered and one intact, shifted slightly as if trying to stretch. And then came the low, guttural sound. Not quite a growl, not quite a sigh, but something in between. Rhea took a step back, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was no automated drone or forgotten loader bot. This was alive. And then she saw the chains. Thick, heavy restraints wound tightly around the creature's body, pinning it to the floor. There were burn marks on its scales where the chains had seared through the flesh. Alongside it, a smaller figure stirred, a hatchling, no bigger than a large dog, tangled in a separate set of restraints. The little one let out a pitiful cry, and for the first time, Rhea saw the creature's eyes. Golden, luminous, and full of rage. "Why have you come here, human?" The voice wasn't audible. It was inside her head. Deep, resonant, and brimming with contempt. Rhea staggered back another step, her breathing shallow. I didn't know you were here," she stammered. "I just picked up the signal. That's all." The creature's head lifted slightly, the massive jaw clinking against the chains as it turned to face her fully. Its gaze bore into her, weighing her words. "What do you want?" "I don't want anything," Rhea said quickly. "I didn't come here to take anything. I just dash." The hatchling let out another whimper, cutting her off. The larger creature's head dipped low, its tail coiling protectively around the little one. "Leave us," it growled. "We have suffered enough." Rhea hesitated. She could feel the weight of the creature's anger, but there was something else there too, a depth of pain and despair that made her stomach twist. "You're hurt," she said quietly. "Both of you." The creature snorted, sending a cloud of metallic dust into the air. "It does not concern you." Rhea stepped closer, her tools rattling softly at her belt. Maybe it should, she said, her voice more steady now. What happened here? The same thing that always happens to my kind, the creature replied, its mental voice tinged with bitterness. We were chained, bound, and used until we were no longer useful. And when this vessel crashed, they fled, leaving us to die here. Rhea swallowed hard. She wasn't a hero. She wasn't a fighter or a freedom fighter. She was just a mechanic. But the sight of the hatchling struggling against its bonds, and the weary anger in the creature's eyes, made it hard to just walk away. For a long moment, she stood there, her mind racing. Then she unclipped a multi-tool from her belt and crouched by the first set of chains. I can't promise much, she said, but I'll do what I can. The creature's gaze softened, just a fraction. Do as you will, human. And so Rhea got to work, not knowing what she was getting herself into, only that she couldn't simply leave them chained and alone on this forsaken planetoid. The nights on Broken were colder than Rhea had expected, even with the faint shimmer of distant starlight reflecting off the metallic sand. She huddled under a thermal blanket, the soft glow of her diagnostic kit casting a blue light over the tools spread across her lap. The multi-tool she'd tried earlier had been useless against the alloy of the chains. They were forged from something far tougher than the standard starship materials she'd worked with. She would need something sharper, something more precise, perhaps the salvage cutters from her rig, once she'd fixed the faulty power core. By the second night, the dragon had begun speaking to her again, though its words were as cold and sharp as the air. It spoke in fragments, in answers rather than stories. But as Rhea returned each evening, inching closer to freeing the creature, those fragments began to connect. What did they want from you? Rhea asked, sitting on the twisted frame of the cargo bay's entrance. The dragon's hatchling was asleep nearby, nestled into its mother's flank. The larger creature's golden eyes reflected the pale starlight as they regarded Rhea without moving. What they always want from our kind, fire. Rhea frowned. Fire? Not flames from machines. Not chemical propellant or plasma discharges. True fire. Living fire, born of us, bound to us. The dragon's tail shifted slightly, the dull clink of a chain link echoing through the wreckage. They wanted to wield it as a weapon, to sear their enemies' hulls, to burn through their armor, to raise planets if need be. Rhea tried to picture it, a creature like this, used as a weapon of war. It was a grim thought. She wasn't naive, she knew the galaxy was full of people willing to exploit anything for power. But seeing the dragon here, trapped and wounded, made it all too real. How did you end up here? She asked softly. The dragon turned its gaze to the dark horizon. For a moment, Rhea thought it might not answer. Then, with a slow, deliberate rumble, it spoke. They captured me when I was young. Separated me from my brood. I had not yet grown strong enough to resist their machines, their nets. They forced me to carry their payloads, to burn their enemies. And when I tried to defy them, they brought my hatchling to me. Rhea's chest tightened. They used her against you. The dragon let out a low, guttural sound, something between a growl and a sigh. Yes. They chained us together, her life tied to mine. If I disobeyed, they would punish her. I had no choice but to comply. I endured their chains, their commands, their cruelty, to keep her safe. Until this ship fell from the sky. Its tail flicked, scattering dust. When we crashed, the crew fled. They thought us dead, or they did not care. Either way, they left us here, bound and broken. Rhea stared at the thick, gleaming chains. She'd always thought of chains as something simple, links of metal that could be cut, melted, or broken with the right tools. But these were different. They seemed to hum faintly, their surface flickering with a strange energy. They weren't just restraints, they were a prison. What's stopping you from burning them away? Rhea asked. You said you have fire. The dragon shifted slightly, and the chains glowed faintly as if reacting to its movement. These bonds are designed to absorb what I create. The harder I struggle, the more they tighten. I am no engineer, human. But I know these are not ordinary chains. They are forged from alloys of my own kind's bloodline, designed to nullify what I am. Rhea's stomach sank. That's awful. She looked down at her toolkit. None of her salvaging gear seemed like it would be enough to cut through something so specialized. But the dragon's story, its pain, its determination to protect its hatchling had struck a chord in her. The idea of leaving them here, abandoned and powerless, was unthinkable. "I'll figure it out," she said, mostly to herself. "There's got to be a way." The dragon tilted its head slightly. "Why do you care, human? What is it you hope to gain from this?" Rhea hesitated. She hadn't really thought about it in those terms. She wasn't expecting payment, or reward, or even recognition. She looked at the hatchling, still sleeping, its tiny wings twitching as it dreamed. Then she met the dragon's piercing gaze. "I'm a mechanic," she said. "I fix things. And right now, you're the most broken thing I've ever seen. That's enough of a reason." The dragon's eyes softened, just barely. For the first time since they'd met, Rhea thought she saw a flicker of gratitude. It said nothing more that night, but when she returned the next evening, it began to tell her more about its kind, its homeworld, and the ancient conflict that had scattered its kin across the stars. Piece by piece, the dragon's story unfolded, each fragment adding weight to Rhea's determination to free them. As the nights went on, the silence of Broken seemed a little less oppressive. Rhea kept working, her toolkit growing lighter as she burned through options. She wasn't sure how she was going to cut through those chains, but she knew she couldn't stop now, not until the dragon and her hatchling were free. It was the 6th night when Rhea's solitude was shattered. Her cutting torch flickered against the edge of the dragon's chain, the tool spitting weak orange sparks that barely scratched the alloy surface. She was about to adjust the power settings when her scanner let out a sudden, sharp ping. Something or someone had entered the planetoid's atmosphere. Rhea froze. She looked at the dragon, who remained still but alert, her golden eyes narrowing as the faint glow of distant thrusters grew brighter. Rhea glanced at the hatchling, still curled up against its mother's flank, before grabbing her handheld scanner. A starship was coming in low and fast, its outline too small for a cargo hauler. This wasn't a salvager. It was something sleek, military-grade. "Trouble?" Rhea muttered to herself, her pulse quickening. The dragon let out a low growl that hummed in Rhea's skull. "They have come again. They will seek what they left behind." Rhea didn't need to ask who they were. It was obvious. She scrambled to pack her tools and pull her rig into the nearest scrap pile hollow. The dragon shifted her weight slightly, chains rasping against the ground, as the ship touched down on a rocky plateau not far from the wreck. The hatchling stirred, letting out a soft chirp of unease. Rhea crouched low, peering through a gap in the metal debris as the first figures emerged. A team of 3, clad in black enviro suits with glowing visors, armed with sleek plasma carbines. Their movements were sharp and practiced mercenaries, by the look of them. They approached the wrecked cargo hold slowly, scanning the terrain, weapons at the ready. "What are they looking for?" Rhea whispered, as if the dragon could hear her thoughts. The dragon's voice rumbled back. "Me. They lost their prize, and now they have come to reclaim it." Rhea's grip tightened on the wrench she was holding. The dragon had hinted at what would happen if she fell back into the hands of these mercenaries. It wouldn't be pretty forced servitude, endless experiments, maybe even something worse. Rhea had no illusions that they'd leave her alone either. If they found out she'd been tampering with the chains, they'd eliminate her to tie up any loose ends. "Stay here," Rhea said, though she had no authority to give commands to a massive alien dragon. She grabbed a small toolkit and slipped away from the wreck toward the shadows. She wasn't sure what her plan was yet, only that she couldn't let the mercenaries find the dragon and her hatchling without a fight. From her vantage point, she watched as the mercenaries moved closer. They were talking voices muffled through their helmets, but close enough for Rhea's earpiece to pick up snippets. "Should have sent more. We don't know how badly it's injured. Just need to extract the offspring." The larger ones too much trouble without proper restraints. Bring the anti-shock modules, just in case. Rhea's jaw clenched. They wanted the hatchling. Probably figured it would be easier to handle, more useful in the long run. She couldn't let that happen. Carefully, she worked her way to the side of the wreck, where she'd spotted an old power junction panel. It was damaged, like everything else on this planetoid, but it still had enough juice to create a decent distraction. She rewired a few connections, sparking a minor overload. When the crackling burst of light and noise erupted near the mercenaries, two of them spun around, training their weapons on the flickering panel. What was that? One of them barked. Some kind of discharge from the wreck. Stay sharp. While they were distracted, Rhea slipped closer to their ship. She wasn't sure how long her makeshift distraction would hold, but if she could disable their ride, maybe they'd think twice about sticking around. She located the ship's external maintenance hatch and pried it open with a plasma torch, quickly severing a power conduit. The ship's lights dimmed, and an alarm began to blare from the cockpit. "Ship's been compromised," one of the mercenaries shouted. "Pull back and secure the perimeter." It wasn't much, but it bought her time. Rhea hurried back to the wreck, the dragon's piercing gaze following her as she scrambled over the debris. "They won't stay distracted for long," Rhea said breathlessly. "I don't know if I can keep them away." The dragon was silent for a moment before responding. "You have already done more than I expected, human." The dragon shifted her wings, the dull clink of the chains making Rhea wince. "If they find me, they will not stop at mere capture. They will destroy me to prevent anyone else from having what they could not control." Rhea swallowed hard. "I'm not going to let them take you or your hatchling. We just need to hold them off long enough for me to dash." Another shout echoed from outside. The mercenaries were regrouping, and their weapons were lighting up again. One fired a burst of plasma at the hull, sending shards of metal scattering into the air. "You are outnumbered," the dragon said calmly. "Your tools are insufficient. And yet you remain." Rhea looked at the hatchling, who had pressed itself against its mother's side, its tiny claws clutching at the chains. "I can't just leave you like this," she said. "I don't care if it's crazy. I'm not going to let them win." The dragon's gaze softened, just for a moment. "Very well, human mechanic. Then we fight." The sound of plasma fire raked the air as Rhea scrambled to cover. Sparks flew from the edges of the wrecked cargo bay, a glaring reminder that the mercenaries weren't here to negotiate. She could see their helmets glowing in the near darkness, their weapons trained on the dragon's massive silhouette. The hatchling let out a panicked cry as another blast scorched the ground just feet away. "We're running out of time," Rhea muttered, her pulse hammering in her ears. The cutting torch in her hands was still hot, its beam growing weaker with every second. She had only managed to weaken one link so far, but it wasn't enough. She glanced up at the dragon. "Can you fight them?" The great creature stretched her wings, the chains trembling as she tested their strength. "Not yet. These bonds remain. But if you can free even one." The dragon didn't finish her sentence. She didn't need to. Rhea knew what was at stake. If she could sever just one restraint, the dragon would be able to unleash enough power to scatter their attackers. The hatchling, now pressed tightly against its mother's flank, whimpered softly, its golden eyes wide with fear. Rhea's stomach twisted. She didn't know if they could make it out of this alive, but she knew she had to try. The mercenaries moved in closer, their footfalls crunching on the metallic sand. Rhea crouched low, pulling out a salvaged plasma cutter she had jerry-rigged just minutes before. It was unstable, its connections hurried and dangerous, but it was her only chance. She pressed the tip against the glowing chain link and held her breath as it hummed to life. The beam was blinding, a searing line of energy that crackled and hissed. One of the mercenaries shouted something, probably noticing the sudden flare of light. A bolt of plasma screeched past Rhea's shoulder, and she ducked instinctively, her hand tightening on the cutter. The beam wavered for a moment, but she kept it steady, forcing it against the alloy. Another burst of fire rained down, sending shards of scorched metal cascading around her. Almost. Rhea gritted her teeth, sweat dripping down her face despite the chill of the air. The chain link was glowing white-hot, warping under the relentless heat. With one last surge of energy, the cutter's beam sliced through. There was a deafening snap. The broken link clattered to the ground, its once immovable weight now useless metal. The dragon let out a bone-shaking roar, her wings snapping open fully for the first time in years. For a moment, Rhea thought she might be trampled, but the creature stepped past her, flames sparking from her jaws. "I am free." The words echoed in Rhea's mind like a rolling thunder. The dragon moved faster than Rhea could have anticipated. Her enormous tail lashed out, scattering debris and throwing two of the mercenaries off their feet. A burst of searing fire erupted from her mouth, lighting up the night. The third mercenary dropped his weapon and ran, his figure silhouetted against the towering inferno. "Go!" Rhea shouted. She didn't know if she was yelling at the dragon, the mercenaries, or herself. She only knew they had to move before reinforcements arrived. The hatchling clambered onto its mother's back, its claws gripping tightly as the dragon spread her wings wide. The air vibrated with the sound of their massive beats, the metallic sand swirling in a whirlwind. For a moment, Rhea thought they would take off without another word. But then the dragon paused, her golden eyes meeting Rhea's. "Human mechanic," she said, her voice no longer sharp and wary but steady and solemn. "You have given us our lives back. You have earned my thanks." Rhea stood there, still gripping the overheated plasma cutter. Her legs felt weak, her arms heavy, but her chest swelled with an odd sense of pride. "I didn't do it for thanks," she said. "Just make sure you keep that little one safe." The dragon nodded, a slow and deliberate gesture. "I will remember your name. May your craft always endure." With that, the dragon leapt into the air, her wings catching the faint light of distant stars. The hatchling let out a shrill cry, not one of fear, but of joy as they rose higher and higher, until they were nothing but a shadow against the endless night. Rhea stood watching long after they had disappeared. She knew she couldn't stay unbroken forever. Her rig still needed a new power core, and she had a lot of work ahead of her. But for the first time in years, she felt like she'd done something that mattered. Something more than just patching up machines and scrapping old parts. She'd helped someone, something beyond herself. She turned back toward her rig, now half buried in metallic sand. The planetoid was as silent and empty as before, but it didn't feel the same. Broken. Wasn't just another dead end anymore. It was a place where something important had happened. A place where she had made a difference. And, as she climbed into the cockpit and fired up the controls, she smiled faintly. Maybe that was enough.